And just want to welcome you as you gather in, and slowly people are coming in. Please share with us your name, company you're with, and what potentially brings you to today's webinar. I'd love to hear a little bit from you as we get started. Welcome, Kendra. The title caught you. It caught me too. And I'll explain a little bit more about that as we go into our webinar. And Marianne from London Mount, welcome. Great to have you join us today. Elizabeth, welcome from Transdev, Ontario and Manitoba. And Andrew, welcome. Good to connect with you through this webinar. Again, just please put in your name, where you're coming from. Hello, Maggie, from where you're coming from. London, surrounding area, throughout southwestern Ontario. I know we have folks coming from all over the place. Oh, and Lindsay from New York, welcome. Jennifer, Tracy, good to see you or hear from you again, Tracy. Lakin and Brenda. All right, we'll continue again, just popping in your names and where you're from. My name, in case you're wondering, is James Coolidge, and I've actually been with ARIA Consulting for over 2.5 years now. I love working with leaders and individuals to explore what's possible as they transform and take hold of new opportunities. And I do want to thank you all for joining me in this webinar, Bulletproof Leadership, Staying Clear-Headed When Shit Hits the Fan. And now I'm going to say it, and you're going to see in a moment why. So as we begin, though, I have a question for you that I would also like you to put in the chat and respond to. What comes to your mind when you see this image? Put it in the chat. What do you see comes to mind? First thing comes to mind when you see this image. Pop your responses in the chat. Monday. I love it. Yes. Chaos. Okay. Overwhelmed. Close your mouth, silly. I had one person say yum. Duck, me a year ago. Yes, lots of things come to mind as we look at this image. Everything coming out once. You know, it's funny when I showed this image to my wife and I said to her, this is what I'm leading with. I've been looking for this image. And she's like, I don't get it, James. I'm like, what do you mean you don't get it? What's not to get about this? I mean, it's quite obvious. Like shit's hitting the fan, it's hitting the guy's face. And she's like, yeah, I don't get it. And I'm like, what don't you get? And she's like, where's it coming from? What's the source? It's like, whoa, mic drop right there. Exactly. That's the problem with environmental uncertainty. Shit's hitting the fan. We're getting covered in it. We feel the stress and anxiety. But what's the source? Where is it coming from? As we go through as leaders, this is one of the primary concerns that we got to kind of focus in on. How do we prepare for it when we don't know what we don't know in the midst of shit hitting the fan? Well, few things that occur in leaders and teams and organizations when environments shift and the existing systems and strategies are doomed to fail. One is that with the rapid change and the sense of loss of control, emotions intensify among individuals. Emotions around everywhere are high. We see that what was thought to be consistent and trustworthy is all gone. There isn't a full knowledge of what happened or what's about to occur. So our uncertainty for ourselves and our team and our organization increases. Then with access to resources shifting, efficiencies are compromised and new skills may be required to accomplish just our basic goals. So our core capabilities become threatened. Stress eating, maybe. I mean, I like comfort eating when I'm feeling a little bit stressed. Maybe some less sleep due to that stress takes a toll on our physical health and on our mental well-being. And then with the possibility that all could fail within this changing environment, as a viable option, making a wrong decision could literally be catastrophic to the organization. Therefore, the risks greatly intensify. As a result, during this periods of high level of stress and change, our mental capacity becomes limited to what our limbic system and our brain permits us to access. As a result, our cognitive executive function begins to decline in our prefrontal cortex, making strategic decisions very difficult. In fact, in this space, what many leaders will find at this time is that they're simply euchred. Their core beliefs, self-limiting narratives, unconscious bias, and simply a sense of, I don't know what's happening, and I don't know how to navigate this, can overwhelm the leader. And I want to encourage you with this, that this is normal. If that's how you're feeling, you're in a normal state. there's nothing wrong with you. It's just the challenges that we see when it comes to environmental uncertainties. So as we look at this, a caution I also have for those that might be change junkies is just because you can and are moving through the new environment doesn't mean that you are effectively leading within it. I want to share a little bit of a story, be a little bit real with you about who I am and some of the learnings I've had from more of my misleadership as opposed to effective leadership. It started off first with where the stress came, and it was June of 2019, and I received a very difficult call from my daughter. My eldest daughter, who had been having significant breast pain because of a lump, was diagnosed with breast cancer, and it was aggressive. And receiving that news, and at that time, we went through treatment, and she went through surgeries and radiation and chemo, and we thought we were kind of getting through it when all of a sudden, as we all know, in March of 2020, a pandemic hit and a response to that of lockdowns occurred, making that very difficult. But at the same point, I was leading an organization within the City of London, trying to help meet the needs of those most vulnerable being impacted, specifically within the youth area. So looking at the challenges of that, I found myself very much overwhelmed and stressed. And I ran ahead. I went ahead of my team thinking that we've got this and we've got this solution of how we can continue to make an impact. Meanwhile, trying to juggle what I was experiencing internal as well as external in that new novel environment. It was during that time where I began to see some businesses thrive. They were very successful. In fact, for some had banner profit years. Other businesses closed and never reopened after the pandemic. And I began to question, what is it that happens where leaders and some organizations move forward in novel environments, whereas others seem to become paralyzed and just simply shut down? Well, that led me into school, into University of Guelph, Lang School of Business, doing their Master of Arts in Leadership. And my key focus, the reason and my motivation behind that was, how did we keep moving forward and transition and shift, whereas other organizations seem to really struggle in that space? What is it that I don't know or that I don't know about others that we need to maybe work and leverage to help everyone succeed and thrive across Southwestern Ontario? So that was the focus of my studies, which led me to this space that we're here today. So what goes on within the brain? What happens to us that we can't control? Now, just so you know, I'm not a brain expert. That is not my area of forte. Did not study that. But in my research and in my studies, I learned a lot about the brain. And the first part is the prefrontal cortex. It's that core cognitive executive function area of the brain. It's where our function comes from to make strategic decisions and to evaluate pros and cons, takes on various experience and knowledge, leverages them to consider possibilities when encountering novel challenges. However, what we know that can limit and hinder is linear systems thinking. When consistent thinking or consistent action plans and making things more effective and efficient, but doing similar things within the same mental models over a long period of time, our cognitive flexibility gets impeded when all of a sudden there's a novel change in the environment. We know how A plus B gets us to C, but when B is removed, how do we still get to C? We've been doing it for 40 years this way. We can't do anything different. That linear thinking, systems thinking, can lock people in to not be able to find creative new ways when the environment shifts. And then the other thing that we know is that stress impedes our ability to leverage our prefrontal cortex, because stress focuses us and brings us down into survival oftentimes. And in that time of survival, we're leveraging our limbic brain piece. Now, the limbic brain piece is kind of our fight, flight, freeze, and some people throw in fawn there. I still don't fully figure out fawn, but I'm sure it matters somewhere. But in that fight, flight, freeze, fawn space, our limbic system is really trying to protect us, but it limits us to certain emotions or unconscious biases that we have, or high-level emotional experiences that we might have occurred in our life as a leader, but even in our life as a child, in which case protective parts emerge and situations get completed without the full knowledge, because our limbic system is trying to quickly make a decision and determine whether I fight, flight, or freeze. What am I going to do in the space of uncertainty, in the space of high risk, in the space of stress? And so with emotions high, our access to our intelligence can get blocked, and therefore limits our options available to develop from our knowledge and our past experiences. And then something I discovered when jumping into coursing coursing in the coaching courses is around the reticular activating system. This one kind of surprises me because I've not heard of it before until I actually began taking coaching and exploring what this means. And basically, it's the part of the brain that allows in senses and also protects us and blocks out certain sensory functions. If we were to take in everything in our environment, our brain would be overstimulated and would short circuit. We'd be in a corner shaking because the sounds, the lights, the taste, the smells, everything would be overstimulating. So the brain limits us to what we need to know to function effectively. Again, we can see how this can limit people in consistent systems thinking or linear activating, how they work. Because all of a sudden when the environment changes, I'm not aware, I don't know of what else is possible because I've never had to use it, and my brain has not allowed me to input anything that goes to the contrary. An example of this, recently bought a truck. And some people might say, why did you buy that truck? But I bought a Ford Maverick, and I'd seen a couple on the road, and it kind of makes me feel like my good old farm days where I can jump in the truck and drive. And in that space, I began thinking, okay, there's a great truck. I look at it, drove it around, everything looks great, bought it. I get home, and literally a few weeks later, I pull the visor down, and it says roll advisory. I mean, a roll advisory? What's that? And it says see the other side. So I flip up the other side, and it says make sure seatbelts are fastened. Do not make rapid turns because it can roll over. It has a rollover issue. I guess the center of gravity is not fully balanced in the Ford Maverick. Didn't even think to look at that. That didn't even cross my mind because my reticular activating system had never encountered it before. The sensory that maybe some of these vehicles have a rollover issue was never something that was top of mind because none of my vehicles have ever had that. So it's that piece where how do we begin to explore and discover what's possible? What are our options if our reticular activating system hasn't yet absorbed it or seen it in the environment at which we live? What does this look like then when our brain goes into the stress? It looks very different for different people. For some, it's overcompensating. I tend to be more the overcompensator. I like to run hard and try to find successes and help other people succeed and possibly burn out in the process. For some, it's brain fog. For others, it's a panic attack or exit strategies or just simply paralysis. I think of one CEO that I was working with, and at this point was when I was at a nonprofit and meeting with him to talk about the next donation to help us meet and achieve some of our goals. Prior to that time, about 6 months prior to, he had lost his wife, and she was in her 40s, and it was tragic, the experience that he was going through. And when I met with him, I could see there's something off. He just wasn't himself. Obviously, he's grieving. I sort of accepted that part, but there was just something different about even his personality and how he was approaching the conversation and approaching how things were going at the office and the business in light of what was going on with his wife. And so in talking with him, we quickly discovered that he was really disappointed himself because he would open up his computer, he'd look at his email, get lost in his email, and was literally paralyzed. He's like, James, this isn't me. This isn't how I show up. I don't know what's wrong with me. I feel like I'm broken. And as I heard him begin to share and began to explore some of the things that were showing up, I helped him understand that actually you're in your survival space right now. You're in deep grief, deep emotional pain. You've lost a loved one. And it's natural that that part of your brain now is freezing your ability to your prefrontal cortex to make those strategic decisions that you're used to making. So what you need at this point is some self-compassion. You need to show up for you, not your organization. You need to begin to allow yourself permission to recenter yourself and ground yourself, possibly go into delve into some of the deeper grief. But just trying to push yourself through and function isn't going to be an option right now because you're human and your brain at this point is trying to survive. So it's those points where we need to understand there's certain things I have control over, there are other things that I don't. And having that self-compassion as we find novel situations showing up, how do I show up authentically as me? Acknowledging what I might be going through personally that might be coming into the organization, and acknowledging what's going on in the organization that might need to be addressed, that I might be taking a personal approach to it and I need to become more objective. Our brains are fascinating things, and as much as we think that we can control it, we need to remember the thing that we think can control it is the thing that's controlling it. So our brain is the brain, and all these thoughts come through, but that Thinking about thinking is where we start moving our energy back to the prefrontal cortex. And there's some ways that we can do that for ourselves, for our teams, and for our organization. So what do we do when we find ourselves in the state of sort of maybe overreacting or paralysis or just trying to figure things out? My encouragement is this: slow down and get curious. Oftentimes as leaders, we think we need to be in that space of knowing. But at this time, it's about knowing more about yourself, the team, and the organization, getting curious about the environment. And our goal in this space is threefold as leaders. One, we want to regulate uncertainty. We want to help people that are still in this uncertain environment, ourselves and those that we're leading, to be able to regulate that uncertainty. Two, we want to increase the risk capacity, helping people feel that psychological safety to begin to explore and become curious and try things out and learning very quickly, so we make quick mistakes, quick resolutions, but increasing that capacity for risk, that folks feel free to take some risks in those spaces. And then third is leveraging dynamic capabilities, helping the team to still understand what we do have and how we might be able to leverage other resources in order to accomplish similar or maybe even unique goals that we never thought of before this environment. Now, as we go into this next slide and we focus on myself, we have a poll that I would like you to take. And the poll is this: what do you personally do to respond to a rapid change in your environment? Take a look at this poll and see what it is that you do in a rapid environment. I'm going to give you a few moments to respond to that. Okay, so take small focus actions to establish control. Seeing that one moving, pause and reflect. Okay, hopefully that's not just because I said that earlier, but again, your responses are anonymous. So please put in what you feel you do. So withdraw, get lost sometimes in those reactive tasks and screen times. Absolutely. Yeah, we see that. No one's going to the woods. I'm surprised. I thought somebody would be going, yeah, I'm taking off. I'm going to the cabin in the woods. All right. But yeah, so as we look at the way that we respond and engage with ourselves, there's that part of how do we move forward? How do I begin to center myself and ground myself in this space? And I think I can stop sharing there. Share results. Marissa, I'll let you lead through on how to stop sharing that on the screen because I'm not sure how to get that off the screen. But so yeah, when looking at ourselves, we have certain things that we look at. Or maybe that's just my screen. There we go. That's what I need to do. Looking at how we can move forward in this space for ourselves. So what can I do when I find myself in this state? Well, first, there's the area of just simply, again, calming down. Let me get over to the right PowerPoint. Calming down. And we do this through mindful practices. This can look like breathing exercises. And I'm not sure if you've ever heard of box breathing, where you inhale as you count to 4, you hold it for 4, you exhale as you 1, 2, 3, 4, hold it for 4. And doing that 3 to 4 times just to slow your breathing down, which again helps everything begin to relax in your body. Another option that I share with people is doing something like 5 senses, where I look at what are 5 things that I can see? What are 4 things that I can hear? What are 3 things that I can feel? What are 2 things that I can smell? And what's 1 thing that I can taste? And just allowing ourselves to slow down and become present in that moment. There's many mindful exercises that you can also find online. One of the other things I like to do is going out for nature walks and just enjoying nature and just stopping and pausing and looking potentially at a forest and then focusing in on a tree and then focusing in on that branch, focusing in maybe on a nest, in on a bird or on a butterfly or something, and you just get more and more focus and just be still and allow again the body to relax and the mind to calm down. And I can tell you at high points of stress, that is something I had to regularly do throughout the day. During high moments of concern for my daughter, concern for my family and my other daughters, and then concern for the organization, what was going on during that pandemic response, constantly had to realize I'm not showing up authentically as me. I need mindfulness to slow down, to calm down. And then the other is intentional thinking. And this is the type 2 thinking where I'm not just reacting to knowing, oh, I know what I need to do, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to direct everybody really quick. We're going to make fast, rapid decisions. No, it's taking that time to just simply slow down, and just think about thinking, challenge some of those thoughts, challenge some of those immediate actions that I think I need to take, and realize, no, that may not be the right action. What else is possible, and how do I become more curious? And then self-grounding. And within self-grounding, there's three things that we do in this space. And first is reflecting. What's showing up for me? And what do I know to be true? Again, in our limbic system, it will quickly complete a thought. It will tell us for certain what something is based on some of our past experiences that have strong emotions attached to it. And we immediately know the solution. We're leading from the gut. So what's showing up? And then asking yourself and challenging yourself, what do I know to be true? And what do I still need to know? After that, taking some time to reframe, challenging some of those self-limiting beliefs, or challenging some of those labels that we've placed on mental models. So within systems, we've labeled things to know what processes are happening to accomplish a certain label, or what challenge we're addressing with that label. Challenging some of those labels to reframe it. What else could be happening? What could be possible if? What else could be done in the space? And then in that is that refocusing of what is actually possible. What are we going to put into action? And with that, to increase the intensity of taking risks, is helping folks understand it's not a win and lose scenario, it's a win and learn scenario. Let's move away from feeling and the fear of failure, which only pushes us back into our limbic system, and let's get back into that prefrontal cortex. So what am I learning? And let's learn quick if it's not getting us to the goals. Let's learn rapidly and change as we navigate the uncertain environment and the novelties that we're experiencing. And then another area that I would encourage is to get a certified coach, certified executive coach that can help you and guide you through this process. And that's because they don't actually guide you. A coach is not advising you to what they would do, because they're not you. They have different resources, they have different experiences, different skills, different knowledge that they would bring to the table if they were in the same situation as you. So a trained coach, what they're doing is asking you provocative questions, evoking awareness to what else is possible or what might be getting in your way. And why this is so important is because the solution could be in other parts of our brain from other experiences and knowledge that we've acquired. However, our limbic system is hindering our ability to get into that space. So a coach asks questions of, where else did you experience something similar to this? Boop, pops into that part of the brain. What did you do in that space and what were the results? Boop, pops over here. What is similar to today's experience to that experience that you had? Boop, another experience. What do you still need to know? And where can you get that from? So these different questions come in executive coaching. And my encouragement to you is this. If you're a leader in a high profile position and you don't have an executive coach, you need to get one. It's not something that they're telling you what to do. They're not mentoring you. It doesn't make you less of a leader. In fact, the most successful CEOs have an executive coach that they meet with at least on a monthly basis, if not bi-weekly. And for some, it's weekly, because they realize the importance to leverage all of their knowledge in their brain and experiences, and to also leverage the knowledge that surrounds them. So in my scenario, when coming into that pandemic space, we were a youth center. We had a skate park, we had kitchen training, teaching kids how to cook and do different meals. We had a basketball program. We had all these different things. When all of a sudden we couldn't meet and our center was seen as, well, it's not a proper, it's not an essential service at this point. It was like, what do? We have 18,000 square feet. Do we just shut it all down? And what about the youth that we were serving and supporting with meals at a street level? What happens to them as they get dispositioned and dispersed around the city in different hotels and motels throughout the city, so that they are not connected and meeting with other people or filling up homes with multiple numbers? So in that space, we began to reframe. What else is possible? How do we take the resources we have? And when looking at some of the other resource centers that got shut down because they weren't able to operate either, we began to consolidate our services and transformed our youth center into a food procurement space, into a place where we also delivered meals to youth that were in the city. So we had to reframe. We're not limited to this, but what are the current needs and how do we address those needs and shift that thinking so we can still achieve our goals, which was to empower youth and families in the City of London. So in that space, again, reframing that process of slowing down, asking questions, and looking at the resources we had, how do we still achieve the goals in a new and fresh way? I've got another poll that's going to be coming up for you in this. As we look at the team, how do you engage your team during uncertain or turbulent times? How do you engage your team during uncertain or turbulent times? Put your response in there as you read through them. What's showing up for you of what tends to happen in your organization or with you. Again, these are anonymous, so please be vulnerable and honest in your responses. And we will keep your responses anonymous as well. For us, it's very helpful to see what maybe some of the leaders and teams are struggling with and how we can provide even additional resources into these spaces. All right, so we are seeing that there are some feedback loops being created. Looks like there's a lot of folks that make space for open conversations about concerns and ideas, which is actually really good. All of these are simply responses, though, of what's happening. Inviting input based on team members seen seems to be our close second. And I'm just going to pull, because I think I now know what I'm doing. I'm going to pull that poll up off the screen, and I'll let Marissa end it whenever she's ready. And so when we look at that space and we see what's happening when it comes to our teams, we see there is definitely some value in here. So again, vulnerable story from me. I said we totally reinvented our youth center. We had 3 resource centers in the community that were leveraging the space. So our gym and our auditorium were now loaded with tables and food that was getting donated from restaurants, from other food procurement places that couldn't get rid of their food because restaurants were closed and they had not yet shifted over. Well, we had food operations, food procurement, food distribution going out to hundreds of homes and hundreds of youth, leveraging around 350 volunteers in the space to do meal deliveries. We were doing wellness checks in those spaces, where as volunteers were driving, we were encouraging them, please find out how the youth is doing because they're now even more isolated. They've lost their community from downtown. We want to ensure that if there's anything physically needed, that we bring in the proper resources from other services. If there's anything that is emotionally or mentally, if there's any risks of potentially suicide because depression, et cetera, is beginning to set in, let's identify what the needs are. So a really good feedback communication was happening, and I'm thinking, yes, glorious leader. I got this. I was made for this. Change, change, change. I love change. And I had a team at that point of 5 core staff that were making it happen. The problem is I forgot the rest of the team. You know, there are those people that were meeting with youth at the youth center and just connecting, having those conversations and just giving them a safe place to gather. We also had several basketball sports teams that were going on, and we had a coach and several volunteer coaches that were part of the team too, but they weren't part of this new initiative that I had transformed and made. And it was fascinating to see how, in my mind, I was being successful, but unfortunately, I missed my team. I missed the rest of the people that are trying to figure out, so what do we do in this space? James has run ahead, and we feel very much left behind. I didn't ask the deeper questions. I went very quickly into the solutions that I felt were the most important and how we could sustain ourselves as an organization and even grow ourselves. We actually grew our revenue because of the impact we were having. More people were giving in to increase the impact we were having in the community. But I had missed the team and the greater impact to all the families that we were serving. I failed to slow down. Unfortunately, I had a director of operations at that time that called me out and said, James, the team is wondering where you are. They feel very much marginalized and left out. In fact, during that time, I had one team member, when I first told them, when the March break sort of announcement was made, that was going to be extended a week, I told the team members, take your laptops home because this could be a long haul. And if so, we could be looking at up to 3 years to restabilize before we come back to sort of a new normal, or whatever that might look like. I had one that said I was a conspiracy theorist, that there's no way we're going to be back in 2 weeks. Everything's normal. This is just whatever. But I already done some research on plagues and other pandemics and the responses that had happened in different countries. And I was like, we don't know what we don't know yet. And we have all experienced that during that time. Sorry to trigger you if this is triggering for you, where things were constantly changing every day. Nobody knew. And then as it progressed into year 2 and shutdowns were still happening, I had that same person say, James, are you the conspirator? did you create this virus? I go, no, 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 didn't create it either. But at that point, at least we had acknowledged how do we get the team engaged, and the team was very involved in doing at-home workouts and things like that with the basketball team. So here's the things I learned from that, and how do we help the team and leveraging the team in the space. And the first is we harness, I need to just flip over here. We need to harness other perspectives from the team member. Since we are limited by our RAS, our reticular activating system, we don't know what we don't know and how to clarify or gain more information. But as we look at our team, they also have a number of experiences that we can leverage in this time of novel change or novel uncertainty or whatever is happening within our environments. They help us to clarify the gaps. We provide more inputs and more feedback that challenges our unconscious biases or the things that we think we know, our core beliefs, our limiting narratives. We open up the opportunity to hear from others and receive that input. So while we might have a really good idea, it could be even better if we allow this input of diverse perspectives. And really in IDE and the whole focus and research around diversity, its actual focus was around that, diverse individuals from different backgrounds and the experiences and the knowledge and the skills that they bring from those perspectives to the team, and how to leverage that during novel change experiences, environmental uncertainty, VUCA events, to throw that out there. It gets used a lot. But in that space of how do we leverage our team and help allowing them to identify the gaps. Also, it helps to identify the barriers. It allows their expertise in those areas from different organizations to maybe help reframe some of the narratives, maybe challenge some of our mental models because they had a different system structure that they operated in that might be a better fit for what we're encountering today. And then it's leveraging those alternate resources of the team. What resource options or alternate suppliers, or they might have had some other contacts from previous business experiences. Getting the information from the team and creating that safe space psychologically where they can share or challenge or question allows us to make better decisions strategically and begin moving forward with confidence that we're getting that feedback from the team. In that space, then we can start leveraging the dynamic capabilities. It's amazing when I think of the number of people that have immigrated to Canada under a professional banner and aren't actually operating or functioning within that profession. Now, I understand there's different regulations, there's different certifications, and et cetera, yet there's still skills that are being untouched and experiences that are unknown because we're not leveraging the full capability of even our team members. And so getting to know what other skills and experiences our team members bring to the equation. What are some of the other strategies or approaches they've experienced maybe in other cultures or other countries that this experience that we're maybe surprised by in Canada isn't so surprising for them from where they came from. How did they address it? How did they go forward? So utilizing the dynamic capabilities by first identifying what some of those capabilities might be. And then focusing on emergent strategies. Change is going to have to happen. So how do we leverage that change with our team and beginning to test things, explore things, and we find that it's successful, exploit them. It's in this space that what is happening doesn't have to be negative or bad. There could be something that's actually good or even new or even innovative that will come out of the space. How do we look at our emergent strategy approach to decision making? We want to get to this goal. We don't know how to get there right now, but we're going to do what we can on the way toward and evaluate it through feedback loops to see where we need to make slight edge changes to still accomplish and achieve our objectives. Our emergent strategy approach, as opposed to our strategic plan, allows us to still accomplish the vision, the mission, and the purpose of our organizations, as opposed to be caught into the KPIs that we may not be able to achieve when the environment shifts and uncertainties increase. We're going to be looking at organizations, and we have another poll question here for you. How do you help your organization proactively navigate uncertainty? How do you help your organization proactively navigate uncertainty? What shows up there for you? And again, be as vulnerable as you want. Check all the ones that apply. And how do you proactively navigate uncertainty as an organization? All right, we're seeing a few responses coming on there. So it looks like building a culture that values learning and experimentation. That's definitely coming up high. And some of the others down here. Yeah. All right. Some great responses. And it's encouraging to see and to read what is happening in the space and in your organizations. So as we look at organizations, there is a lot of ways that we can help navigate what we are actually experiencing. And a lot of this centers around environmental scanning, environmental, both internal environment and external environment. And it's fascinating to me how it seems so simple and so basic, but we tend to leverage it only when we're doing our strategic plans and not as a regular place within our organization structure, especially during uncertainty. So when looking at these different areas, let me get this clicking again. One of the ways of doing environmental scanning is through Porter's 5 forces. What is the threat of new entrants, supplier bargaining power, the buyer bargaining power, and looking at the threat of substitutes or the competition intensity? All this is still happening in environmental uncertainty. So as we look at, for example, tariffs that are going on right now and what that could turn into, what opportunities could emerge, don't be surprised if there's other organizations that are also emerging and looking at those similar things and might be moving ahead because they're already looking at you as the competition and figuring out how they can take over some of your market share. So when we're looking at this, this is one of those things that need to be a regular piece of our observations when leading through environmental uncertainties. Then there's the whole pestle environmental scan, both internally and externally. How's it impacting? How is the political landscape of other countries impacting some of our employees and our workers? At YFC, we had an individual from the Ukraine. And when the war broke out in Ukraine, it impacted him because he had family that was literally being bombed every day. We saw the stress in his life. And that was impacting our organization because our organization, its compassion and empathy for him, also had deep concerns for him and his family and looking at ways that we could support them. At the same point, we still needed to be an organization that was meeting the needs of other Ukrainians and the other individuals in London. So it's keeping in that space in the pestle assessment. It's not just external, it's also internal because humans are humans. Our resources are humans. And in that space, as stress and as life happens to them personally, it does come into the workplace. And we need to find ways to help them grow and move through to assess what do I bring in here in my emotional intelligence that this workplace needs and what is actually coming from the outside that I need to have that in maybe another space where I can address that where it's safe for me to do so. So that emotional intelligence and maturity is so important when working with our employees, but also for ourselves in this place. So pestle assessment, both externally and internally. The other one is the SWOT analysis. And people say, yeah, SWOT's so old, it's so regular. I guess my question would be with new environment, are there any new weaknesses that might be emerging? Any new threats? Have we talked about it? Have we talked to our teams about it? Do we know what's happening at the front line and some of those stresses that might be impacting them internally or new barriers that they might be experiencing externally that's not coming back to the senior management team? Again, why the feedback loops are so important and leveraging the team's knowledge in these spaces. SWOT analysis isn't something we do only when we're doing strategy days. It's something that we want to get ingrained almost in the people's mind on our team and in our organizations to constantly be looking and sharing observations as they see things adjusting. Another one is a stakeholder mapping. How do we look at our current individuals and our culture, both internally, externally, where interest alignments are happening between what we do as an organization, where there's power and influence that we can control, like Apple and the iPhone. iPhone didn't exist, it was a cell phone, but also emerged this iPhone, which is a computer on a phone and everything else, and a locator in case my body goes missing. They created and influenced the power on that model to keep it as proprietary and keeping people locked in that were iPhone fans or Android fans accordingly in that space. Then there's that influence and interest grid. Is the interest there versus the influence we have over the interest? What is our strength in that space? How do we move forward? Is it shifting? Is it changing? How do we realign? Organizations that thrive and continue to grow are constantly doing stakeholder mapping and understanding the environment to which they're working or serving or selling to in those spaces. So, what do I do to strengthen this cognitive executive function. How do I prepare for turbulent environments in this space? Well, we deepen cognitive resilience is one thing we can start with. How do I deepen that cognitive resilience? Well, one way, as we talked about earlier, is mindfulness practices. If that's not part of your daily habit, I would encourage you to begin making it so. It's one thing I do with those that I'm supporting through career transition. A lot of stress is in that space. How are we going to pay the bills? What if I lose my house? What if I, like, how do I support my family? We just had a kid. I just bought a house. I don't know what to do. Job market is being saturated. How do I move forward? All these fears start emerging. We don't start by addressing the fears. We start by centering ourselves and slowing down through mindfulness practices. And for them, they put 5 to 10 minutes a day is what they've been encouraged to do. In moments where they begin to feel stressed or anxious again, go back to mindfulness practice. Find what works for you and begin to leverage that. For some people, it's their spirituality and different practices within their religious belief systems. For others, it is simple as breathing exercises or tapping and just becoming present with where they are, or sensory walks, all sorts of ways that we can practice mindfulness. Another is reflective practices. And I would encourage you, if you're not currently doing this, begin to develop a leadership journal, where whether you do it daily or every other day or on Fridays or on the weekend, wherever it can be, because this is for you, where you begin to reflect on what occurred and what did we do? What were the results of that? What could we also have done? What would those potential results have been? And what will we do the next time? It allows you to begin building up your experiences and anchoring some of these shifts and changes that you've already tested, and continue to stay curious. So again, that cognitive flexibility is there, that I know the right answer. I know what we're going to do. We begin to push that to the side. We want to have confidence, but we want to have humble confidence that we show up with what we know, but we know that we don't know everything. And there could be more that makes what we think could be a solution even better. So a reflective practice like a leadership journal is a great way to evaluate ourselves and challenge some of those thoughts of what else could be possible. Second is enhancing our cognitive knowledge and perspective. So building into our knowledge. One way we can do that is continuous internal, external environmental scanning. As individuals ourselves and individuals on our team are looking at what's happening and occurring, we begin to learn from what others are doing. What is the competition doing? Or what is happening in the environment that's causing maybe some of these mental models to be challenged, that our systems are not effective anymore in this new environment. Then looking at perspective building. How do I challenge those mental models? I think one of the challenge we see in today with a lot of industries or organizations, I don't want to pick on any because it's easy to pick on some, but where systematic structures have been set up that don't seem to be accomplishing the outputs for what it was originally set up to do. And the main issue I see there is because people still try to stay in that mental model of that system structure, but the people accessing that system aren't the same. It's a different environment. Our culture is different. Our society in Canada is different. The mental model may not fit. So we need to challenge some of those labels. And that's where we begin growing in what we call sense making and meaning making. We don't know where the shit's coming from. We just know it's coming. What do we do with that? How do we begin to initially label it, get curious about it, challenge some of the things that we see about it as we test it, and then become even more curious about it again until we see consistency flowing from this new environment. And then we can add meaning and meaning making, where we begin to educate our team, to empower everybody in the team to shift to maybe a new mental model, to a new systematic structure that actually addresses the environment and brings the results that we're looking to bring through our organization. And that's difficult to do. So that's not an easy task, but there are different ways that we can do that. There are a lot of different tools that we can pull in depending on the organization that begins to help people challenge and leaders challenge those mental models, as opposed to, no, I know this is right, we're going to do it, but we're not getting the results, so it must be the team's problem. Or it could be the model's problem. We need to be open to challenge everything in new and uncertain environments. And then there's continued learning, whether it be micro certifications or workshops or further education, but continually challenging yourself to grow and gain more information. Then we look at the third thing, which is developing cognitive flexibility to leverage your strategic decisions. You want to develop an ability to challenge some of those thoughts or ways of doing things and become more flexible. So in that area, we might look at scenario simulations or a pre-mortem exercise where we say, here's our plan, here's our goal, it didn't work out, what went wrong? And we begin to look at that before we even launch the program or the task. Ways of challenging ourselves to be flexible. Another is job sharing, letting people try out different roles and different jobs. Another is doing something maybe that's uncomfortable for you, giving yourself an uncomfort challenge. Taking on a project or a task that you maybe not enjoy or you assume you're going to fail, and press into it and stay in that tension of uncomfortableness to get used to what it's like. And you may not be a master potterer, but staying in that space allows you to experience some of the tensions that happen as well in environmental uncertainty, and allows us to feel still okay and safe and confident in that space, even though everything around us might be changing. So when we look at this, when shit hits the fan, and this whole idea for me gives me a very strong visual. As a kid growing up on the farm, as a dairy farm, my dad every once in a while would yell out, "Look at Jim, she's got the shits." And that meant quickly jump, because out of that cow's rectum was going to come a projectile going at like 10,000 PSIs and plaster you with this smelly stench fluid that if it hit you, and I had to get to school that morning, that stench would last with you even after a shower. So when you heard that, you got out of the way. And sometimes that's what we can do. We can just jump out of the way and that's it. And look at the mess. Or we can stand there and get covered in it and it lasts for days. But there's another option. We can actually go into that space and get curious about what it is, its source and its properties and its impact and potential opportunities, and then create something new to grow in both yourself, your team, and your organization's success. For those of you who aren't farmers, that's a manure spreader. And that's what we do with the shit on the farm. We wouldn't just let it pile up. We'd spread it. Yeah, maybe neighbors wouldn't enjoy the scent of it, but it created the food that the neighbors enjoyed to eat. It created the food that the cows need to eat to produce the milk. It produced the beef that people love to eat and that steak in the barbecue when we spread that manure. Something that could be seen as waste was filled with all the nutrients that the land needed. So when you think when shit hits the fan, how do we get curious in that space and begin to ask questions, showing up as our authentic self, acknowledging there might be other emotions that are showing up for me. So I'm acknowledging that and being who I need to be as a leader in that team. I want to give some time for some questions that you might have in the space. I'll leave this manure spreader image up here for now. But if you have any questions that you would like to ask, please pop them in the chat. I'd be happy to answer any questions that might be showing up for you. I'm just going to open up my chat a little bigger here. And I do want to thank you for joining us today, but I want to give a little bit of space here for any questions that might be showing up for you in this area. I know you're coming from different walks of life, and if you do have some more personal questions to ask, please feel free to email us. We'd be happy to connect with you in that space. If there's other challenges that you see yourself going through, be happy to connect with you in that space, and just give you some space to process of what's actually happening. And that is a way that you can connect with myself on LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect with you at any time, have some conversations there. And again, I don't want to cut us off too soon in case there's any burning questions. I will be sending out some tools to you folks as well that have been part of this webinar, making sure that you receive any information that might be helpful, and just some basic tools in each of those 3 areas that will help you even grow your capacity and resilience in this time. All right. Recommendation on coaches. Well, we have some here. I would recommend when looking for a coach, you want someone that is identified that their coaching aligns with the International Coaching Federation training. I wouldn't say that they have to necessarily, and this can get me in hot water with ICF, that they have to be fully certified there. but that they at least have the training and have been challenged to not be giving advice, but rather holding space. Because holding that psychological safe space is so important when exploring novel challenges or what it is that you're experiencing as a person. So when looking for a coach, ensure that the training they have, because there's a number of people that call themselves coaches, there's a number of training things that basically they got 4 hours of training. International Coach Federation oriented training is very intense and really challenges people to, again, hold that safe space for individuals. Thank you, everyone. And my pleasure. You're welcome to seeing some of the comments here. Again, please feel free to reach out. Would love to connect. And I'll be in touch with some tools to you as well.